In 1986, a group of workers digging an irrigation channel near Guanghan in China's Sichuan province hit something hard at 2 meters deep. Not a rock, bronze. The first piece they pulled free was a mask with eyes that protruded 16 centimeters forward from the face. Not decorative exaggeration. 16 centimeters. The eyes of a human skull extend roughly 3 centimeters from socket to surface. Whoever these people built this mask for, they did not look at the world the way we do. The workers called in the state. Archaeologists arrived. What they found over the following weeks was a cache of more than 1,000 bronze and jade objects belonging to a Bronze Age civilization that no Chinese chronicle, court record, dynasty history, or folk legend had ever mentioned. Not a single word. The largest bronze figure stands 2.5 meters tall. There is a sacred tree nearly 4 meters high, with birds perched on its branches, and a dragon coiling down its trunk. And no one in recorded Chinese history had ever written its name. Today I will show you 7 civilizations that historians were certain had never existed. Some were legends dismissed for 20 centuries. Others were completely absent from every document on Earth. Each one on this list was denied with greater certainty than the last, and the civilization at the end of this list, the one whose bronze masks still have no parallel anywhere in the ancient world, has been confirmed in the ground and remains unexplained in the literature. They have found the city. They cannot explain what it is. In northwest Turkey, on a hill called Hisarlik, a German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann stood in 1871 with a translated copy of Homer's Iliad in one hand and a survey crew in the other. Every academic institution in Europe had told him the same thing for 20 years. Troy was a story. The Trojan War was literary invention. The Greeks had written magnificent fiction, and Schliemann was wasting his fortune on a crater of dirt. He was not a trained archaeologist. He had made his money in indigo and gold speculation. But he had read the Iliad as a child and believed it the way some people believe in things that cannot be argued out of them. When his crews broke the first layer of soil at Hisarlik, they found a city. Then another city under it. Then another under that. 9 cities stacked on top of each other in the same location. The bottom layers dated to 3000 BCE. The layer designated Troy Seveda shows walls of ashlar masonry 6 meters thick, a destruction horizon from fire, collapsed roof beams, and human remains left where they fell. Radiocarbon dating places this destruction layer at approximately 190 BCE. The Bronze Age city that burned here was home to an estimated 5,000 people. The walls required quarried limestone blocks weighing up to 8 tons each, placed without iron tools. One camp argues that Troy Seveda was destroyed by the Mycenaean Greek coalition Homer described. The other argues that the city burned in a regional conflict that Homer later mythologized into epic. Neither camp disputes that the city existed, that it burned, and that Schliemann found it under a hill that professional academics had spent centuries insisting was empty. He died in 1890, before the full excavation was complete. He knew enough to die having been right. What archaeology has not resolved is simpler and harder than identifying the ruins. Homer wrote 4 centuries after the destruction. He named names. He described specific fortifications and sea routes. How much else in that poem is memory, and how much is invention? The walls of Troy 7 answer one question. They open at least 9 others. Historians were unanimous. The ruins disagreed. If the idea of buried cities captivates you, subscribe. Each civilization on this list was dismissed with greater certainty than the last. The Bible mentions the Hittites 47 times. In the 19th century, scholars had a clean explanation for this. The Hittites were a literary device, a name inserted by ancient Hebrew scribes to fill geographic gaps. No Hittite city had been found. No Hittite artifact existed in any European museum. No Hittite inscription appeared in any known archive. The Egyptian records, the most meticulous administrative documents of the ancient world, seem to offer no mention of a Hittite empire. Except they did. In 1906, the German archaeologist Hugo Winkler excavated a site called Hattusa in central Anatolia, 70 kilometers east of the modern Turkish city of Çorum. Under the soil, his team found 10,000 clay tablets, written in cuneiform, in at least 8 languages, among them, the full diplomatic archive of an empire that had been in simultaneous contact with Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, and Mycenaean Greece. The Hittite Empire at its peak controlled a territory roughly the size of modern Turkey and Syria combined. more land than the entire Greek world of the same period. In 1274 BCE, the Hittite king Muwatalli II met the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II at the Battle of Kadesh in what is now Syria. Both sides claimed victory. What they signed afterward was the earliest known peace treaty in human history. The original Akkadian text survives in both Egyptian hieroglyphic and Hittite cuneiform versions. A replica hangs today at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The treaty was pressed into silver tablets. The two greatest empires of the Bronze Age, one of them supposedly imaginary until 1906, signed it together. Winkler could not explain why an empire of this scale had gone unrecorded. The diplomatic correspondence confirmed it had existed. The scale confirmed it had been impossible to ignore. What the absence from history confirmed was stranger still. Somewhere between its collapse around 1180 BCE and the 19th century, an empire larger than Greece simply ceased to appear in the record. An empire does not do that by accident. Historians were unanimous. The tablets disagreed. For 130 years after Egyptologist Edouard Neville published his 1896 translation of the inscriptions at Deir el-Bahri, the location of Punt was unknown. The inscriptions described a trading voyage under Queen Hatshepsut, approximately 1470 BCE, to a land her scribes called the Divine Land. Traders brought back live baboons in wooden crates, heaps of myrrh resin still in their roots, electrum, ebony, and ivory. Punt was Egypt's primary source of luxury goods, across at least 3 dynasties. Where it was, no one could agree. Some scholars placed it in Somalia, others in Yemen, a minority argued India. The debate lasted a century and produced no consensus. In 2010, a research team at the British Museum took bone samples from sacred baboons mummified in ancient Egyptian temples, animals the Egyptians had imported from Punt as ritual objects, and subjected them to oxygen and strontium isotope analysis. These isotopes accumulate in bone tissue, reflecting the geology of the water an animal drinks while its skeleton is forming. Young bone is a geographic record. It cannot be changed after the fact. The baboons had grown up in the southern Horn of Africa, specifically in a region corresponding to the modern states of Eritrea and Ethiopia, possibly extending to the Djibouti coast. The vegetation profile of this same region matches the ancient inscriptions almost point for point. Frankincense and myrrh trees, coastal access, river systems that would support the animal populations depicted in Hatshepsut's stone murals. Egypt's mythical trading partner had a location. The evidence had been sealed inside temple bones for 34 centuries. What the isotope analysis does not explain is how the Egyptians navigated there. The Red Sea route to Eritrea requires knowledge of monsoon wind patterns and open water sailing that Egypt was not supposed to possess in 1470 BCE. The ships depicted in the Deir el-Bahri murals carry rigging consistent with deep-water sailing, not coastal cargo hauling. No Egyptologist has fully resolved this. Historians were unanimous. The baboon bones disagreed. In 1994, a Peruvian archaeologist named Ruth Shady Solis began excavating a site in the Supe Valley, 200 kilometers north of Lima, on a semi-arid coastal plain that had received almost no serious attention. The site was called Caral. What she found in the first 2 seasons required a correction to every major textbook on world civilizations printed in the previous 100 years. The city at Caral dates to approximately 3000 BCE. This is the same century that Egypt began constructing the pyramids under the 3rd dynasty. Caral was a full urban center at that date, with 6 platform mounds, the largest rising 20 meters and measuring 160 meters at its base. That base is wider than 3 full-size football pitches placed end to end. An amphitheater seating several thousand, planned residential quarters. A complete irrigation system drawing water from the Supe River. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists had applied a working rule. Complex civilization requires pottery. No pottery, no civilization. Caral had no pottery. It had something else. Knotted fiber bundles called quipus. When the quipus from Caral were analyzed in detail, they showed knotting structures that reappear 2,000 years after Caral's peak in Inca administrative records. The information storage system was older than any textbook said information storage systems could be in the Americas. Imagine yourself arriving at Caral in 3000 BCE. Pyramids rising on three sides, canals delivering water to residences, people whose recording technology is a system of knots you have not yet learned to read. What Shady Solis confirmed is not just that one ancient city was older than expected. She confirmed that archaeologists had been applying a filtering rule, the pottery requirement, that had been systematically hiding evidence. How many other pre-pottery sites were dismissed on the same grounds? How many others are still waiting under Peru's coastal desert for someone to ask the question she asked? Historians were unanimous. The pyramids disagreed. The Mahabharata, composed in its current form between roughly 400 BCE and 400 CE, but drawing on oral traditions, said to be considerably older, describes a city called Dwarka. It was the capital of the divine king Krishna, built on the western coast of India in the region now called Gujarat. According to the text, when Krishna died, the ocean rose and swallowed the city in a single day. Ancient commentators called this a metaphor. Others called it invention. In 1983, the Archaeological Survey of India began underwater excavations off the coast of Bet Dwarka Island in the Gulf of Khambat. At depths between 11 and 14 meters below the surface, their divers found stone structures, walls, architectural remnants in regular geometric patterns, stone anchors with holes bored through them in configurations consistent with ancient Indian harbor practice, pottery fragments, carbon dating of organic material from the site returned dates clustering around 3500 to 3000 BCE, with some samples ranging earlier. The scholars who accept the Dwarka evidence argue that sea level rise at the end of the last glacial maximum, which geologically inundated substantial portions of the Gulf of Khambat by 6000 BCE, is consistent with oral memories preserved across millennia in religious texts. The scholars who dispute it argue that natural geological formations can produce regular-looking stone patterns without human agency. What neither camp disputes is this: something lies on the seabed at that location. 14 meters of ocean separate those structures from the surface. Whatever was there, man-made or natural, was above water several thousand years ago. Who was living in it, if anyone, and whether the Sanskrit texts are memory or coincidence, remains an open and genuinely contested question. Historians were unanimous. The seabed disagreed. Herodotus described it in the 5th century BCE. He called it Tartessos, a kingdom in the far west, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where a king named Arganthonius had lived for 120 years. Where silver came from the ground in such quantities that the people made their cargo ships anchors from it rather than stone. Other Greek writers confirmed the name. Phoenician traders had reached it. Then, sometime around 550 BCE, it simply stopped appearing in any document. For 2,000 years, Tartessos was filed as legend, a story sailors told about impossible wealth at the edge of the known world. In 1958, Spanish archaeologist Adolfo Schulten proposed that the kingdom had occupied the mouth of the Guadalquivir River in modern Andalusia. His excavations found nothing conclusive. The file stayed inconclusive. In 2023, excavations near the town of Hinojos in the province of Huelva, in an area subject to seasonal flooding that had never been fully investigated, began producing structural remains beneath layers of clay sediment. Stone walls, bronze artifacts with metallurgical signatures consistent with high silver content alloys, ceramic fragments dated to the 9th and 8th centuries BCE. The team from the University of Huelva published preliminary findings without claiming a definitive identification. The excavation is ongoing. What is certain is that a polity with 3 centuries of confirmed trade contacts across the Western Mediterranean does not leave no physical trace. That trace is emerging from the Andalusian mud, piece by piece. Historians were unanimous. The stone walls disagreed. To the bronze mask with the 16-centimeter eyes. When the full extent of the 1986 find became clear, Chinese archaeologists faced a problem with no standard solution. The artifacts did not fit any known Bronze Age culture in the historical record. Not Shang, not pre-Shang, not consistent with any neighboring tradition in Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, or Central Asia. The art style appeared in no other Bronze Age culture anywhere on the planet. The sacred bronze tree with its triple-tiered branches and climbing serpent matched nothing in any comparative catalog. It was as though someone had invented an entire civilization's symbolic vocabulary from a starting point no one can locate. The site is called Sanxingdui. Over the following decades, archaeologists opened 8 large sacrificial pits. In 2021, 6 additional pits were opened, bringing the confirmed artifact count above 13,000 individual objects. Among them, bronze masks with protruding eyes designed, apparently, to perceive something other than the visible world. A standing bronze figure 2.6 meters tall, the largest Bronze Age bronze casting found anywhere on Earth. Jade artifacts cut with a precision that modern lapidaries examining the pieces have struggled to replicate. Silk impressions preserved in bronze residue, indicating textile production at a level the region was not supposed to have reached at this date. No written records have been found at Sanxingdui. No inscriptions. No administrative clay tablets. No name for their principal deity, their founding king, or their city. Chinese historical records that document Bronze Age cultures in neighboring regions make no mention of a civilization with this symbolic vocabulary existing in Sichuan simultaneously. Picture yourself standing in front of one of those bronze masks. The eyes are at the level of your chest. The face is as wide as your arm span. The expression is not human in any conventional sense. Whoever commissioned it, whoever cast it, whoever chose to bury it with 700 kilograms of broken jade and burned animal bone, left no explanation. They left the objects. The objects have been found. The explanation has not. One camp argues that Sanxingdui represents a regional variant of the broader Yangtze River cultural sphere, its distinctiveness explained by geographic isolation rather than a genuinely separate tradition. The other camp argues that the symbolic vocabulary is so alien to anything else in the Bronze Age world that it represents a civilization operating from a foundational logic no one has yet identified. Write in the comments which camp you are closer to. You will need to have seen the bronze tree to decide. Historians were unanimous. The bronze masks disagreed. 7 civilizations, 7 places professional consensus declared impossible, invented, or simply too far outside established chronology to have existed. Troy, dismissed for 28 centuries, which burned at exactly the moment the destruction layer says it should have. The Hittites, who signed peace treaties with Egypt and commanded an empire larger than the entire Greek world of their era, and who vanished from the historical record until 10,000 clay tablets came out of a Turkish field. The Kingdom of Punt, located at last in the chemical record of bones that had waited in a British museum storeroom. Caral, older than the textbooks allowed, built by people who recorded information in knots long before the Americas were supposed to have cities. Dwarka, 11 meters underwater and still being argued over. Tartessos, still partly under the mud. And Sanxingdui, which fits no category. The pattern running through all 7 is not that historians were careless. Most of the scholars who dismissed these places were rigorous and well-trained. The pattern is simpler. Absence of evidence was mistaken for evidence of absence. A city not yet found was declared the city that never was. And in case after case, the city was there, in the ground, under the sea, preserved in the oxygen of bones, waiting for the question that would make it visible. The uncomfortable implication is not that these 7 were exceptions. It is that this same logic is still operating, right now. There are places being called myths today. There are traditions being dismissed as invention today. We do not know which ones are waiting in the ground. We only know from these 7 that some of them are. Share this with someone who still thinks the historical record is mostly complete. The record is not the past. It is the past minus everything no one has dug up yet. The mask was waiting in an irrigation channel. It had been there for 3,000 years.